Oh, hey.
Hey.
Hello, everyone. Uh, Today we have a very interesting panel about spatial computing and if it's the future of the metaverse. And together with me, I have my friend and the man of the day, uh, Beniamin Mincu, the CEO and co-founder of MultiversX. And through satellite, we have we have Herman Narula. Welcome, Herman, the CEO and co-founder of Improbable, and the author of Virtual Society, the Metaverse, and the New Frontiers of Human Experience. Herman, how are you? Welcome.
It's wonderful to teleport into Bucharest.
Maybe we need the sound, Herman's sound, to be a bit louder, I think.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, better. Awesome.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have a very interesting discussion today, and I'll go right through it. So last year, there was a lot of discussion, right? We had a vision of the metaverse that was, we thought about it, we saw it in a certain way, and then something happened, and essentially Meta launched something below expectations in terms of execution. Huge vision, but really below expectations in terms of execution. And sort of the discussion around the metaverse kind of faded, and it seemed not to be extremely interesting anymore. And then a few months passed, and two things happened. First, Apple says that it's going to launch the Vision Pro, spatial computing headset, mixed reality. Then Meta comes with their own product with Meta Quest 3, also a lot more about mixed reality, spatial computing. And at the same time, Meta came back and showed that they can actually execute on the avatars as well, with the podcast, with Lex Friedman and so on. So I'd like to ask you both, and you can decide who starts first. Why do you believe that, let's say, the narrative changed and the switch happened from what the metaverse kind of was supposed to be and switched a little bit into the mixed reality direction now? Maybe Herman, if you'd like to take this
You're
one.
bigger on the screen, so please.
You're the biggest guy.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So, I mean, for me personally, it's funny because the public narrative did not tally with what was happening behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, actually, the interest in building massive immersive experiences from brands and sports and music only increased over the last year, where I think a lot of the hype went away, but a lot of the practical business problems that people wanted to solve continued to be real. Last night we broadcast a MLB playoff game into a virtual stadium for the first time in partnership with a broadcaster and with the league. Now that's solving a real problem. There's millions of people around the world that can't come to the game, that can't interact with each other in that context. So there are real business problems that virtual experiences can solve. I think mixed reality, though, is more accessible for the news media and for the investor community to see as a very logical step from the kind of computing people are used to now to something tangible, different, distinct, easy to describe, easy to explain. But for me, it's a lot more like the way Linux took over the server, right? I think the concept of the metaverse is more of a creeping invasion into culture and into the way we interact with experiences. And so I think, yes, it's great to see this narrative shift with sort of better demos, but I think what's really happening behind the scenes is this increased demand for these experiences, especially when you consider like young people 9 to 15, they don't want to passively consume experiences anymore. They want them to be interactive.
Makes a lot of sense. Beniamin?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 points to this. First, people don't want ugly or uninteresting products, which is super simple and common sense. Like, no matter how much money you've paid for something, if it's ugly and uninteresting, no one wants it. And I think that was the very hard and yeah, a very hard and predictable lesson for the initial conversation that we saw around Meta. But I think a deeper point is at play here, which is that if you think about computation, we've had this mental model for the last 20, 30 years about how we interact with computers. And the mental model was around intuitive user experience. That has been built on top. And every computational platform, every computer, every phone, every clock, whatever we built was on this intuitive experience model. And what I'm referring to is when you boot up a computer, you have a screen with applications, and you tap into one application, and then you enter into that application. And this seems so simple and predictable and intuitive just because we've been using this for 20, 30 years. Now, Meta, interestingly enough, has tried at an earlier stage to create a phone where you just boot up the phone and everything that starts it is Facebook, like the application. And this again failed because of the same reason. The intuitive user experience mental model was not there. And so what I think is at play is if we take into account what users are used to, namely that they want a kind of interface where they first enter and then they discover that there are multiple applications in there, and one of them is this, let's say, metaverse world, another is this world builder or something else that you're trying to do, then you have something that you're building with. If we are starting with something where you're just entering in this metaverse world, it sort of feels strange because it's unintuitive. So you're still wondering, some mental loops are still open as to what is happening here. That's one of the points. And then the second point is also that spatial computing is much more about a platform that enables computational artifacts all around us. The key idea here is that whether in new worlds or all around us, as you've seen yesterday and the day before that, will have value or new ideas overlapped on top of the real world, just to enrich and expand everything we're doing. And understanding that this comes first, and only afterwards you're asking the question, what's the simplest way to actually access and interact with this type of experiences? Then you come to glasses, then you come to mobile phones, then you come to whatever enables the simplest experience right now. Of course, this will always improve and become much better with each passing year. But understanding this apparently simple, but then also very fundamental points is what changes the experience immediately. Because with Apple, you've seen a product that you truly love. This is what they're doing always, and with the Vision Pro, the idea is you'll not buy these glasses because you want to be in the metaverse. You'll just buy these glasses because you just want a different type of computer. It's a computer, you'll work on it, you'll do all the stuff, and incidentally, you'll also have this awesome experiences through which you can explore the worlds and so forth. So I think we're now much better positioned for experiences and interplay for all the applications.
Yeah, so Apple, I think, gave the signal. They usually do. They don't really enter a new market unless they really believe that that market will take off, and that they'll really manage to sell the products. So that's why let's say the conversations shifted again into a much more positive direction. And as you said, the experience, it's what drives usage. As long as you understand it, it's nice, it's something you can relate to easier, people will use it. You mentioned, Herman, you mentioned that you launched the Major League Baseball Virtual BallPark. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience? It's not, from what I know, it's not a spatial computing type of experience, but it's more of a quote-unquote traditional experience. Can you tell us how that was received by the users, and maybe some insights about how companies are reacting to the technology?
Sure. So baseball is probably one of the oldest sports in the United States, and it is weaved into the very fabric of American culture. The organization is the only company, I think, in the US that's even immune to antitrust regulation. So it's a pretty profound part of American culture. And it's also a very old sport. The average age is like 50 years old of people who are fans of baseball. And it's very challenging for a game that lasts roughly 3 hours, and of which there are over 2,000 games a year, to see how to really bring an accessible experience, a social experience, to people all over the world who might be fans and within the States itself. So what we were able to do with the league is, over the course of a year, and we've now done 3 events, including last night, we were able to bring not just a few fans, but tens of thousands of fans into a single space at the same time. And there is a kind of magical chemistry that emerges with a large concentration of people. So in the previous event, I think there were actually as many people as there were in the live stadium virtually. And they could all speak at the same time. They could all talk to each other. And with a new product called Game Day 3D, we were able to bring the real-time movements of every player on the pitch into that virtual stadium. So you have the game being broadcast, you have the actual movements of the people, and you have the crowd all around. And that led to some really magical things. People started singing, crowds of people singing songs. There was a huge heart by home plate. As a guy offering me bets on the side of the road. It was like being in an MMO of this sport. And what we're finding in terms of the feedback and the reaction is that this is fundamentally building tangible social relationships between people in a way that you wouldn't have imagined possible online because of the scale. But here's the funny thing. All of this works with VR and AR as well. So our approach is very much one of multiple access modes and access points. And as you look at the commentary and the discussion that was happening in the stadium, several people were remarking this would be awesome with the Vision Pro. I wish I could have a headset on right now and interact with this. So I think the immersiveness of a device builds on the presence of a useful virtual environment in which interesting things are happening. But you need both. I think just to support in some ways Beniamin's point where he said, it's about looking good and being interesting. You need one or the other or both, right? So Minecraft is the biggest game in the world, but arguably one of the ugliest games ever made, in some ways. But it provides such a profound interaction mode that these things can work well. And lastly, I'll just finish by saying, I think a $3,000 headset is an incredible, next step for many of us who can afford or can access that. But I'm also very interested in how, those cricket fans in India who have 4G phones, 5G phones, but no way of buying a headset can interact with the social experience of sport. So I think the metaverse and spatial computing have to have tiers of accessibility. They have to bring together people from a lot of different backgrounds and access modes to be useful.
It's indeed a very different and interesting use case, because people that might have never watched Major League Baseball game before, now they can meet in a metaverse, watch a real live game happening. And I've seen, let's say, maybe a bit of a different use case where games are now streamed with cartoon characters on different channels, so that youngsters start watching maybe hockey games and so on, helping them understand the game differently, and that's so cool, I think. All right, so obviously another big elephant in the room this year, in the past year, has been, and that kind of changed again the landscape, has been obviously AI and what OpenAI managed to do to push everything forward. And I'm curious, how do you both envision the integration of AI in enhancing the user experiences around the metaverse and spatial computing?
Please,
So,
Herman.
Beniamin, you want to go first, or?
Yeah, yeah. You're the biggest guy
Alright.
on the screen, so
I feel like a giant. I can see me seeing Bucharest right now, and I feel worried to move my hand in case I push the front row backwards. But no, so the most exciting thing for us is the formula really for value creation in virtual experiences is a little bit like the law of gravity. You know, if you try to evade it, you will build a bad business. And the biggest term in that formula is the cost of content creation. You know, the games are overwhelmingly too expensive to build these days. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to build a semi-effective AAA game if you include things like marketing cost and content creation cost. And a lot of that content creation is incredibly archaic. You know, if you've ever played a great role-playing game, I know many of you are probably fans, I am myself, you know, think of all the quests, think of all of the assets, think of all of the content that needs to be built over multiple years. So for us, what we focused on is building new products, including an as yet unannounced renderer called Carnival, which effectively allows you to bring thousands of very different looking generated assets into the same environment where they can be interacted with by everybody. So no existing game engine actually lets you render that much diverse content on screen or to dynamically load it. And this requires you to think really differently about how you compress assets and compress textures and geometry. But what's interesting is actually just being able to put content creation in the hands of users, from a prompt to an asset to a skin to a quest to a piece of technology, that really fundamentally changes how games engage people. And it also upends the traditional value chain as well. You know, what big publishers have that indie studios don't is the money to spend on vast amounts of content. Gen AI really levels that playing field if it's used effectively. I think that the final point I'd make is, I don't know how many people have seen Microsoft's AutoGen, which was released recently, but we've become very excited about that. And in general, I think while the world is talking about LLMs, the people in the know are really moving towards multi-agent frameworks and interacting agents which can create software from scratch and even do things like test that software and go through the loops of iteration required to make it solid. These multi-agent frameworks and services for agents, I think, are going to be extremely important in the future of Gen AI and how it becomes useful. And I even think there's a crypto angle here as well, because one of the first things we've started to experiment with, and I've done in my own time as well, is, okay, how do I make my agent transact now? Well, it can't get a bank account. You know, it's going to need a way of interacting that is much more natural for that agent. You know, and this is where the kind of crypto infrastructure, I think, will be supercharged by agentic software.
What I would add is that at the end of the day, what's actually happening is indeed speed of iteration accelerates tremendously. So whatever you're doing, you can do it 10 times, 100 times faster, but then also creativity level just goes through the roof. The things that you would need to invest time and effort to stumble upon, to cultivate and so forth, all of a sudden you start from a standpoint where you're 90% there. You just need a few sparks of energy to actually play with these tools and accelerate whatever you're trying to do. And the funny part is that this doesn't apply to one thing. So it applies to the entire value chain, whatever you're trying to do, whether it's the script, whether it's idea, whether it's incentives, whether it's then building the graphics or building the code, testing, deployment. It is extraordinary if you think about it, that we are nearing this point where English becomes the most adopted and powerful language of programming in the world. So to state that, and then of course other languages will become equally powerful, but to state that if you can speak English, you can now create worlds, create music, create experiences that then move generations. That's a fascinating thought to think about.
The funny thing is, it's actually all natural language, right? I mean, if I wanted to right now, I could talk to GPT in Romanian and have it interact with me and write code. I mean, I think you're really hitting on something really interesting, which is not only that natural language becomes the primary method of speaking into reality what you want to build with software, but also now people who speak any language can interact in a really profound way with, idioms, approaches, being translated from one to the other. Not only your words, but your meaning, your intent can be translated from one frame to another, which I think is really profound. I would also add that I think this is where I think, honestly, the MultiversX ecosystem is a little bit of a dark horse. The way in which you guys have adapted toward not just the metaverse, but preparation for mass user creativity and generated assets, I think will bear a lot of fruit as these technologies proliferate. And it almost feels like we're in the early days of crypto, when people were sort of, you had kind of believers and you had doubters and you had people who were thinking, okay, this technology is important, but where will it go? And that is, I think, where a lot of, not necessarily the sort of GPT AI conversation, but a lot of the more asset generation conversation currently is. The journey from making an image in DALL-E or Midjourney to a game-ready asset, one that is rigged, one that is animated, one that is properly loaded, one that is properly managed in terms of resource constraints, that is a different pipeline, and no one's built that yet. And when that pipeline is ready, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it gets adopted. Interestingly, one of the reasons why we focused on an open source standard for objects using kind of web technologies is because we see the need for a non-engine specific, non-context specific asset definition, which is extremely necessary when people are starting to generate all of this user-generated creativity and want to apply it to different contexts. I think it's going to be very damaging for the business models of some companies which really rely upon these closed ecosystems in order to flourish.
Of course, and now you kind of raised, let's say, the ball to the net, and because we are here talking about Web3 blockchain, I'd like to ask Beniamin, how do you see Web3 and decentralization driving the future of the metaverse?
I do think that the interplay will be indeed between blockchain, AI, and the metaverse. And you'll over and over see how each of this variable changes every other variable, in the sense that if you look at AI, whether it's in the physical world or in any type of virtual world, you'll just be able to accelerate everything that you love. Create more of it, create more, do it more custom on all the languages you want, and so forth. And then blockchain will give you the structure to embed rules for interaction, for markets, for exchange in a way that scales with the world. And then the part that you'll have around the metaverse is just embedding this into experiences. The idea of spatial computing will be that you'll try to create experiences all around you, just more rich. Suppose that we're in this building and then you have different artifacts that you can claim, that you can exchange, that you play a game with, whether it's for education purposes, where it's just interacting in a multiplayer fashion. But then the idea is that this is only the starting point, that you'll be able to transition and portal through different portals, go from one world to another, explore whatever your imagination longs for in some sense. And everything I'm describing now, it almost feels like it's the next 6 to 12 months. It's not, it doesn't feel like we're discussing about the next 5 or 10 years, which I would say will become significantly more interesting, because as soon as you have these platforms that are working, then it's almost like going back to the metaphors I was using. It's like we're having the first piano for the first time. We're looking at it, of course we're playing a few tunes, but we've not yet crafted the first symphony. And during the next period, when we'll see the first truly groundbreaking, let's say, experience, at that point we'll understand how fulfilling, how meaningful, how insightful it can become. And that's also what will accelerate probably the progress, because it's not enough for us to state these ideas. When we transform them into realities that people can share, at that point everyone wants to join and the acceleration kicks in.
Maybe Herman, if you'd like to add something about what you see in the next even 1 year, 2 years, happening in the future in this?
So I think we're in a period of profound economic disruption in interactive entertainment. So we've just seen the Activision Microsoft merger happen, which is an unbelievable consolidation of talent, all of whom make games inside maybe the most important AI company on the planet at the same time. So I can envision that. I mean, there was Satya Nadella was in London a few days ago, meeting a few founders and talking about AI and how they intend to apply it. It's very clear that Microsoft will take Activision and Microsoft IP and probably do some pretty amazing things with Gen AI, I would imagine. But equally, we're seeing a world where, for the first time, there is actually a huge challenge in growth in gaming. The cost of acquiring a new user, $10 now. To get someone to play a game for free costs $10. So suddenly the enormous economic imperative to reduce that cost, the enormous economic imperative to make it cheaper to build content, is something that cannot be ignored. It doesn't matter if you're a skeptic or if you're a conservative around this technology. There is a deep fire that has been lit under companies to adopt it and to make use of it. So I think that, combined with the rapidly accelerating pace of the technology and this self-building nature of the technology, this is something we should not forget. GitHub Copilot is now being used, I don't know by how many developers, but a vast number of them. And so the very rate at which we make software, including the software that will power the Gen AI revolution, is getting faster and faster and faster. And that growth rate is not exponential as we've been used to, right? It's something else entirely. I don't really have I don't think it's hyperbolic, but I think it's some sort of like faster function. And I do think also there's going to be a little bit of a battle for the soul of all of this. Those of you in the crypto community have already dealt with and seen the challenges of regulation. I think right now, Gen AI is going through a similar moment. I'm talking to a lot of founders and investors who are very concerned about open source AI being banned or being regulated, particularly in Europe in some fashion. So I think we have these three forces. We have an economic imperative to adopt this stuff as fast as possible. Almost you couldn't imagine a better scenario for needing this. Interest rates are high, everyone needs to reduce cost, everyone needs to adopt this type of technology. You have a technology that builds itself, which means that it's going to get quicker and quicker. And you have a battle for the soul of open source versus closed. So it's going to be a very interesting time. I mean, what's the phrase? There are years when nothing happens and weeks where years happen. I think this is going to be a year where a century happens.
Beniamin, something to add on what the future holds?
No, I would just double click on this idea that there's many things that we're doing, but indeed, when we're building a machine that becomes self-improving, that starts improving itself with a faster rate than we can understand and manage, there's an extraordinary opportunity in some sense with what that machine can do. And there's also some ways where you want to be careful with where this goes. In many directions, I'm the first to push for progress, acceleration to the maximum. But I do think that with AI, it's almost like you're squaring the power of almost any other technology, just because you can apply it so well across the field. And it's not clear that people yet understand how vast this power is as we speak. So to understand its power right now is one thing, then to look at how the last 6 to 12 months have changed in terms of image, video, audio, and everything on that front. I do believe that the entire entertainment space, but then also everything we do as work will probably shift. And I think there's a great scenario where this can become extremely positive, where we start doing more of the things we love, more of the things that are meaningful and fulfilling, and less of the things that are purely repetitive and we would not be excited about. And at the end of the day, I would say it's the first symphony that will craft, that will shift our minds. Up until that point, we're scratching the surface, we're getting excited. But when we see that first step, I think everyone will want to join, will want to push toward this goal. And I'm happy to see that Romania doesn't wait. That even in the conversations that we have had with the ministers and so forth, they understand that this is the opportunity that we can seize and that we can create enormous opportunities with. Please, Herman.
You know, I think when you mentioned Romania there, I think there's triggered in me a very similar impulse, which is one of the things I found most exciting and why I'm pleased we're working together in ways you don't want me to talk about here on stage. But one of the reasons that I got so excited about Multiverse is because you guys have accomplished so much with such few resources in the beginning relative to the typical value model, the typical, million engineers at Google kind of model. And it's interesting to me that this blind spot, that great innovation can happen and is happening in Romania and in other places that are not normally the places of focus for Silicon Valley. It continues to be a blind spot. You know, I talk to investors every day who ask me, aren't there no innovative crypto companies in Europe? And I'm just like, how could you possibly, how could you possibly draw that conclusion? And I think that actually that's a huge strength. You guys almost have a invisibility cloak that you should take advantage of. While others are busy discussing these topics, I think you can ship, and you have shipped, and you have built things. Whether it's adaptive state sharding or adoption of techniques that were being touted as cutting edge when you'd already implemented them, in crypto. I think the same mindset can be brought to Gen AI. The beautiful thing about this technology is it just doesn't require a lot of money. It is actually a profoundly proliferated technology already rooted in open source, already very, very efficient to work with. Yes, of course, training foundational models can require hardware and can be expensive, but making use of the more high margin, high value applications of these technologies, which is where all the value will lie, that requires ingenuity, that requires a boldness and a willingness to execute on these things, which I think exists all over the world. I also feel like there's a real blind spot that people have, which is very similar to the early days of crypto, which, Beniamin, you were more part of than I was. But it's not just a technology, it's a new way of thinking about how you build a business, how you do things. It's a mindset shift. And wherever those mindset shifts happen, giants tend to topple and tend not to be able to adapt to that. So for me, there is very much a gunpowder moment here. What castles can we bring down? What previously unassailable businesses, because of their monopoly power or because of, no one could ever have imagined, a challenger product popping up, where are those vulnerabilities? And I think that this particular ecosystem is really well positioned to take advantage of that. So I'm excited to see what people in the crowd, go and build and go and do, and what you continue to create, Beniamin, as well.
Woo! Thank you.
Awesome. I think on that note we can end the panel in a very positive note. Maybe Beniamin, if you have one last thought or anything to add.
Let's just build it.
Let's build it.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Thank you so much, Herman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.